Thank you. So, so actually, the author as vegetable is descriptive, but it really doesn't have anything to do with this this paper that I'm going to present. But I'll tell you something about about that at the end. So what this paper is about is effectively a kind of a changing regimes and changing definitions of priority in science. So in terms of topic, the paper kind of sits at the intersection between the vast literature on priority in science on one side, and the other one, the disputes about discoveries. So by that I mean Ludwig Fleck, Augustine Brannigan, Henry Collins. So if you want, the construction of the objects of discovery. So that's the area that this paper occupies. But in terms of approach, as I hope to show, is actually quite different. So, and he moved. So I got interested in this because I was trying to do some kind of comparative work on effectively how the new is defined and assessed and managed in different regimes. So, and this happens when you start hanging out with lawyers. So, and you start noticing that, for instance, the notion of the new in copyright law is completely different from the notion of the new in patent law. Right? So, for instance, in copyright law, the new takes the shape of originality. Okay, and originality is a relation between a work and the author. So the author is the point of origin of the work, right? And because the author is an individual, and all individuals are individuals different from all other individuals, the work is new by definition because it's produced by a person who is different from all other people, right? So the notion of the new is effectively, is a result of something originating from somebody who is unique, okay? So it's a genealogical relationship. If you look at patent law instead, the notion of novelty, that is the crucial notion of patent law, is not. It doesn't have anything to do with the relationship between the inventor and the invention. It has to do with the relationship between the invention and similar inventions that happened before. Right? So, if you want, is a quote objective relation between the invention and other inventions. Effectively, the inventor doesn't play much of a role at all in patent law, right? So you see that, these are two examples of, in both regimes, copyright and patent, they protect only the new, but they define the new in ways that, in my view, are quite incommensurable, right? So so when I was thinking about this, I said, okay, look, so therefore, priority in science is not going to be any big deal because, the claim is not being presented as the product of an author, right? Otherwise, it would be scientific fraud, right? And the claim is not even presented necessarily as useful. So, the notion of, the kind of the logic of patent law doesn't apply. So I really thought, in a sense, scientific priority, would be some sort of kind of 0-degree priority. Would be the simplest kind of, timestamp of an event, and that's it. And I was surprised to realize that it is instead quite complicated, and that there are at least two major regimes. One that is pretty much early modern, and one that certainly was codified around 1850, but it started earlier as well. So I will discuss these two systems and some of the interesting problems about them. So at the empirical level, what was interesting to me is that I was picking up a number of cases where, so here's where secrecy comes in. I was noticing a number of cases that they looked like cases of secrecy, people being concerned about being scooped. but it looked like a weird kind of secrecy. So these are some of, so basically, it seemed to be a secrecy generated by the fear of not of being scooped by your direct competitors, but by being scooped by those who were working in the publication system. Okay, so being scooped by those who actually were supposed to be there to help you make a claim public. Okay, so not your direct competitors, but so let me give you some examples. So I have a piece in press on, surprise, surprise, Galileo, where I argue that Galileo effectively pretty much plagiarized the telescope as a result of a patent application in Venice. So the short story is this. A Northern European artisan goes to Venice with a telescope, approaches the Venetian Senate, probably either to get a reward or to apply for a patent. The Venetian Senate takes the telescope and passes it to Paolo Sarpi to have an opinion. So Paolo Sarpi is effectively an ad hoc patent examiner. Paolo Sarpi looks at the telescope and passes it to Galileo. Okay. So here, Galileo did not try to scoop the Northern European artisan. The artisan lost priority as a result of a leaky patent office. Okay? So there is no evidence that actually Galileo pursued, tried to get hold of this information. This information most likely was given to him by somebody who was supposed to not to do that. Okay. Christian Huygens, 1675. He invents the spring watch. He wants to publish the discovery. He sends a letter to Henry Oldenburg without describing what the invention is, but just giving an anagram. When he gets back a letter from Oldenburg saying, "We have received your anagram, I've shared it with the gentlemen of the Royal Society," at the point Oldenburg solves the anagram and tells, Huygens tells Oldenburg what the discovery is, which means Huygens did not trust the editor of the journal. Okay, so this would be like us not sending a manuscript to ISIS, but just sending an anagram, and when the ISIS editor says, "Okay, I got the anagram," then we have a documentation that the editor has received the anagram. We solve the anagram. Huygens actually did something more interesting. In the meantime, as he was waiting to hear from Oldenburg, he patented the watch. And therefore, he released the information to Oldenburg after receiving a French patent. This is not a case like a modern case where you have scientists who try to patent because otherwise the publication would create prior art that would invalidate the patent. This is a case in which Huygens is using the patent as a timestamp. So this is patenting for priority, not for property, right? NIH. Data recently assembled by the Office of Research Integrity at the National Institute for Health shows that the majority of cases of plagiarism in contemporary US biomedicine, and this refers to data from 2000 to 2005, involves peer review process. So more than half of the plagiarism case involves reviewers appropriating grant proposals. Again, we're not talking people appropriating articles. We're talking people, published articles. We're talking people appropriating material that was supposed to be rewarded, right? 1836 US Patent Act ruled that none of the patent office employees could develop financial interest in the patents they were reviewing. This measure did not reflect hypothetical fears because between 1809 and 1811, the first director of the patent office, a certain William Thornton, threatened Robert Fulton, the steamboat guy, with rejection of his application unless he agreed to enter into a partnership to exploit these patents. So what Thornton did, he kept writing to Fulton, look, I have knowledge of prior art who would really damage your patent, but I would be happy to make it disappear if blah, blah, blah. There was no evidence that there was the prior art. Another thing that I've noticed, because I did some work on the disclosure of patent specifications, I noticed that in the early modern period, when people would apply for a patent, they would disclose it very, very briefly in most generic terms. And then they would file a full description 6 months later. It turns out that I think is the same problem. That is, inventors, they went to court and they said, here's my invention, give me the grant, and then I will tell you what it is. Because they thought that if they disclosed the invention, the various clerks could do basically what Sarpi did to the Northern European telescope maker. Right. So, and this thing about delayed disclosure of invention is common across France and the UK, Germany, and Italy. 2009 annual report issued by the Beijing office of the European Union Chamber of Commerce. Quote, foreign companies are losing vital classified information at various stages of business development, including patent filings. It is not uncommon for such proprietary knowledge to be leaked to Chinese competitors. End of quote. Okay, so this is the replay of Venice 1610, now in Beijing. People apply for patents, and clerks at the Chinese patent office allegedly pass the information to local entrepreneurs. So this is, so I realized that all this, the behaviors connected to this type of activities look like secrecy, but it really was not the standard secrecy that historians and sociologists have looked at. It was not secrecy because you think that your competitors are going to scoop you. Here, it's like the patent examiner, the journal editor might scoop you, right? So this provided a window into something that I think is quite tricky and I think interesting. That is the transition between secrecy to openness, because all these cases are about that transition. Unpublished claims or unpublished inventions that are either being published or they are patented, and something happened in the transition. So I start thinking that the temporality of secrecy and openness is quite different. What I mean is that, by temporality, I mean that secrecy and openness, they have very different relations to time. And let me give you examples so that you see what I mean. If you take trade secrets, then in my view, trade secrets are as good an example as you can of secrecy. So trade secrets are something that you basically make secret. You don't register, because of course, if you register, it would not be secret, right? So trade secrets, you are allowed to keep them secret until somebody finds them out, or they leak out, or somebody reinvents them, right? Discovers them independently. So trade secrets, they have, if you want, a time of death, but they don't have a time of birth. They have the time of death, that is when they stop being secrets because they become public. But they don't have a time of birth because they have always been secret, okay? If you think instead about the kind of the regimes, copyright, patents, or scientific authorship, everything is about priority, okay? A claim, what's important is the birthday, okay? So effectively, the transition between secrecy and openness is a transition between a regime that operates in time but is not about time, meaning it doesn't care about priority, to a regime that is all about priority. And the transition is precisely what we call priority. Is the establishment of the priority is that transition between these two regimes. Now, what happened in this transition? This is a point of singularity. This moment of going from secrecy to openness, or if you want, from non-temporality to temporality. It's a moment of singularity, and all things can go wrong. And so I start thinking about the scenes in the exchange of, in movies, gangster movies where you have exchange of drugs for money, or people who have been kidnapped, who are being swapped. So you have the two briefcase problem. One briefcase with drugs and one briefcase with money, right? And so in order to make this exchange safe, you would have to synchronize it perfectly, right? So that nobody at any point manages to have both the bag with the cash and the bag with the drugs, right? So, and as you know from movies, this is a delicate situation, right? Now, in the case of scientific priority or technological priority for invention, the situation is worse because of what the economists and lawyers call the non-rivalrous nature of information. That is, you don't need to steal the material base of information. You can just look at it. So this would be so the analogy with scientific priority would be the two briefcase problem. One opens a briefcase with the drugs to show that there are drugs. The other person opens the briefcase with money to show that there are money. If this was a scientific priority case, the priority would be lost, because as soon as you open the bag, it's out of the bag, literally. So it's not that you open the bag just to show that you have the cash. This would be a situation where you open the bag and the cash flies out. Okay? So this two briefcase problem in the case of information or knowledge is particularly tricky because of the non-rivalrous nature of information. Now, then I started looking at, there is actually a lot of mathematical work on this. They're called the bit commitment protocols, or zero knowledge proofs. These are all algorithms about how you manage to manage an exchange in which somebody is telling you that I'm going to give you X, but you are not going to know whether this person actually has X. Okay, so how you manage these exchanges to make sure that the person is bound to giving what he or she had promised you, right? Now, so I start thinking that the only way in which priority disputes would disappear or would be much more manageable is if a scientist's claim could appear as a fully formed article instantaneously, printed in a journal with the date and the author name displayed on it, without having to traverse intermediate stages that would make it porous both to outbound and inbound borrowings. Okay, something that you could just publish without, not sharing it, but also so quickly that you wouldn't be able to absorb work from others. Okay, so if, and of course this cannot happen, but I'm just saying that the only way in which priority, I think, would not be an issue would be if one could achieve instantaneity of production and publication. Okay? Of course, this cannot happen. This creates a delay, or if you want, simply a time between production and publication. And it's this time lag that creates the possibility of priority disputes and also of plagiarism accusations. Because if you have this time, somebody might have access at the work you are doing in this time window, but also because other people don't know that you are doing this kind of work, they might think that you have plagiarized them if they're working on something analogous. Right? So the conditions of possibility of accusation of plagiarism and also the conditions of possibility of losing priority have to do with this time lag. Right? So here comes the regimes. I think the scientists have worked out pretty much two types of regimes to handle this problem. The first one is the early modern one, and it has to do with ciphers. So the logic is pretty simple. Okay, so is to create a protocol that divides content from time, and I mean it in the most literal sense. You send, say, an anagram out to as many people as you can. Once those people receive the anagram and acknowledge that they have received the anagram, effectively they have given you a timestamp not on a claim, but on a claim of having a claim, okay? Because you haven't told them what the claim is, right? Because the claim is encrypted, right? So, but they give you a timestamp on the claim of having a claim. At this point, so this is like a freeze-dry claim. You add water after you have received the timestamp, and the claim is reunited with the timestamp, right? So this is the logic, which, if you want, is a way to break down this time interval in a way that makes it safe. Okay, you divide steps, and you just go from one step to another only after you have received certain guarantees. For instance, you have received an acknowledgement from the people you have sent the cipher to that they have got it, right? So this would look pretty simple, except that it's not. So first of all, this use of anagrams, I thought that only Galileo did it. So Galileo used it for the discovery of the phases of Venus, the appearance of Saturn. It turns out that Huygens used it for pretty much everything. Newton wrote the calculus. He wrote an anagram about calculus to Leibniz via Oldenburg. Okay, Hooke published anagrams on pretty much everything. So this is something that it was much more common than I thought it was among mathematicians. So what are the problems? The problem is that there is no relationship, there is no univocal relationship between the cipher and the claim. Okay, so first of all, the anagrams had to be short, right? So the anagram would not be like an encrypted version of a full article about a claim. It would be like a super synthetic rendition of what the claim was, okay? So there is no one-to-one relationship between the claim and the anagram, but only between the anagram and some subset, a synthetic version of the claim. Second, anagrams could encode short enigmas or metaphors. So it wouldn't be like one anagram of something that you would read as a claim or as something like a claim, but it would be, there would be another step. To give you an example. In 1610, Galileo wrote this letter about the discovery of the phases of Venus, which he was still observing, okay? So the discovery was in progress. He wrote, quote, "These immature ones are now read in vain by me." O-Y. The O-Y is that he needed those two letters, but they didn't fit the anagram, so he just added them at the end, right? So these immature ones are now read in vain by me. When unscrambled, this meant the mother of loves imitates the shape of Cynthia. The mother of loves being Venus and Cynthia being connected to the moon. So the shapes of Venus imitates the shape of the moon, right? Phases and phases. So here you see it's a double encryption, right? So you need to know some mythology, blah, blah, blah. But what is interesting is that if Galileo turns out that he didn't want to, suppose he thought that he had not discovered the phases of Venus, he would have simply not unscrambled the anagram, and basically what people would have seen is these immature ones are now read in vain by me, which is actually would have been the description of what he would not have seen, right? So it was like a kind of a Janus phase claim. If it works, I will solve it. If it doesn't work, I don't solve it, and I'm saying exactly that I didn't observe anything, right? The other thing is that anagrams could be solved in ways that one could attach a different claim to it. So this anagram was solved by Kepler as meaning that Galileo had discovered 2 satellites of Mars. So if you are good with anagrams, and if you know enough about, if you have basic humanistic background, you know a little bit of mythology, you can come up with different well-formed sentences that don't refer to the claim. So so to go back to the example of I found another example where one of the, I think Wallace picked up an anagram sent around by Huygens, and without acknowledging having received it, he republished it with just a few letters extra, just in case he could come up with something so that he could then have a chance to invent a discovery from the anagram, right? So, the general point here is this, that this system is not safe because it creates a play, and this play cannot be resolved. So you may end up being in a situation in which effectively it's like having a valid birth certificate, but then you can adjust what baby refers to a posteriori. And this cannot be avoided. What I'm saying is that this play is inherent in the system. Okay. At the same time, this system was put in place precisely to avoid a different set of problems, right? So to recapitulate this part, you begin to see that there is no way to establish priority because of the two suitcase problem. And when you try to go around the two suitcase problem with a kind of a cryptographic system like the one I've described, you introduce another set of play in the system, okay, which does not allow for a kind of a watertight resolution. All right, so this is the first part. Now, the second part is that when we move up to the present, I forgot one very important hybrid example. The hybrid example is the sealed note deposited with scientific academies. The sealed notes were introduced by in the Royal Society shortly after its establishment. They became extremely popular in the Académie des Sciences. I went in the archives. There are apparently hundreds of boxes. So we're talking thousands and thousands of sealed notes. The sealed note is effectively, it's not an anagram, but it's perfectly equivalent to the anagram. You write down what your claim is, you seal it, and you give it to the secretary of the society for safekeeping. So this is equivalent, logically equivalent to sending out an anagram. And then the secretary keeps it, and you have the ability to unseal it at a later time. So instead of solving the anagram, you physically unseal the note. Okay? And by the way, there is a move to re-establish this system for a reason that I'll discuss later. So the sealed note model is a hybrid. It's logically like the anagram-based model, but it lasted a lot in time. Sealed notes are still used or were used at the Académie des Sciences until a few years ago. Instead, anagrams disappeared. So what replaced anagrams? What replaced anagrams is confidentiality and peer review. Okay, so the main differences are this. Now we don't send an anagram to journal editors. We send the whole thing. We send the whole thing, and we hope that what we send will be treated confidentially. So there is a social norm that replaces the encryption. Okay. Now, the main difference is that now we can't rewrite history. That is, once you submit a paper, you have submitted a paper. You can't say, oh, no, what I submitted is, I meant this. You disclose the entire claim. Okay, so you cannot backtrack it, right? At the same time, as I've shown from the examples, confidentiality is probably less reliable than encryption. The example from the NIH, the plagiarism cases, shows that clearly it's not. So the new system of you still get a timestamp by submitting a manuscript to a journal, right? In fact, you have submitted on X date, sometimes submitted in revised version on this date, accepted on this date. So you have actually the history of the timestamps on a publication. So there is still priority, but you disclose immediately the thing. The same thing applies to patents. In the past, you would first get the grant and then disclose. Instead, now, as part of the patent bargain, you are supposed to disclose the full invention when you apply for a patent. And you hope that the people at the patent office are not going to leak your invention to other people, right? So the difference is pretty clear. So the question is, so another difference is the status of witness. So the status of witness is that if you think about the first case of the anagrams, the people are really, they're not witnesses to your priority in a, I mean, they are, but in a very specific sense. That is, I send a letter to you with an anagram. I haven't asked you to be a witness. I'm just sending you a letter. And when you receive the letter, you acknowledge that you have received the letter, and you become a witness to my timestamp. But I didn't ask you. So I'm kind of, in Althusserian terms, this is a case of interpellation. Like, you know, I'm turning you into a witness by sending you a letter, right? As opposed to the kind of witnessing that you find in academies where witnessing is part of the form of life of the academy, okay? The witnesses don't need to be they don't need to be peers. They don't need to be specialists. You're just using them as timestamps. They could be anybody. It's better if they're famous, but they don't need to be in your field, okay? So for instance, Huygens getting the patent is, in a sense, getting a timestamp from the French king. It doesn't matter whether the French king understands what the clock was, right? So how come scientists and inventors now are willing to give away so much? And how come they are, you know, willing to take the risk that the confidentiality protocols may fail, right? I think one of the answers is that we, I mean, scientists, but also academics, we expect more. Again, if you think about, I discovered the phases of Venus, I send you guys an anagram, I'm not expecting you guys to give me a job. I just want a timestamp from you, right? Instead, now in a scientific publication, you send the work to a journal because you expect a certain kind of credit. So not just the timestamp, you expect a publication credit, which is not something that the anagram system can give you. The anagram system only gives you a timestamp. Okay. So the biggest way to summarize these differences is that we go from a system of priority of discovery to priority of publication. And publication, I mean it, publication in academic journals, not publication in the early modern sense of making things public, okay? And this is, I think, very clear in this case that I'm going to describe very quickly on the dispute on the discovery of Neptune. Right? That hinges precisely on the changing meaning of publication. This is a discovery that pitted Adams against Le Verrier. Adams said, I made my discovery public. I communicated it to all these people in Cambridge. Le Verrier instead says, I published it in the Compte Rendu de l'Académie des Sciences. Okay. So publication is no longer making things public, but it's publishing in a journal. So the argument was that, so Le Verrier was backed by Arago, and Adams was backed by Brewster. Arago stated that priority could be granted to claims published through print, and this had less to do with the technical feature of the medium, meaning we should publish so that many more people get that information. Right? It actually was not this. Printing an article in an academic venue establishes priority not so much by providing a reliable machine-made timestamp, but rather by producing priority credit for the discoverer as a reward for making a relevant finding available to many colleagues. So priority becomes a contract. You give us something, and we'll give you not only a timestamp, but we'll give you credit, okay? As opposed to we'll give you just a timestamp. And this is also what happens in patent law. That now you give the public, you disclose to the public what the invention is, and in exchange for this disclosure, you're going to get a temporary monopoly on that invention, right? So it becomes a contract. As Arago mentioned, publication meant publication to the world. Believing that the way Adams had communicated his work did not amount to publication, Arago found his priority claims utterly irrelevant. And I quote Arago: "The public owes nothing to him from whom they have learned nothing, and who has not rendered them any service. Mr. Adams has no right to figure in the history of discovery of the new planet, neither by a detailed citation, nor even by the slightest allusion." So you notice how categorical Arago is. That is, Adams does not deserve anything at all because he didn't send us the paper. Okay. His logic, Arago, is analogous to French post-revolutionary patent law. Within a few years of this dispute, French law was changed to prevent people from claiming trade secrets as priority. So, if I file for an invention, Corey jumps up and says, "Whoops, I had this invention 10 years ago." The fact that she kept it as a trade secret does not invalidate my invention. So trade secrets don't count. They have no timestamp, right? So this is the analog of Arago. Basically, Adams, by not publishing in an academic journal, kept his discovery as a trade secret, and therefore zero credit. Okay? So it's really quite a direct comparison. Brewster's position could not have been more different. Priority is, quote, "a feature in space, an event in time." So there is no talk about contract. It's just an event. And then he says, "what is done is done." Meaning that if you have discovered something, there is no way that people can take it away from you because it's a fact. As opposed to Arago that says, no, it's not a fact, it's a contract. Brewster defended Adams' priority over Leverrier by invoking the old system. So he refers to Arago as the new law of priority. And he says, this is something new, I've seen it before, but this is bad. We should go back to ciphers. And he cites Galileo, Huygens, and Newton as examples of the good old day. So, according to Brewster, a scientist has priority the moment she discovers something new. Brewster recognizes that the fact that the discovery needs to be, there is always a social dimension to discovery. Somebody has to recognize, somebody has to provide the timestamp. But he rejects the social contract put forward by Arago. And he puts forward two major concerns. The first one is effectively academic monopoly. He says, if this law becomes the new law of priority, the people who work in the boondocks, in the provinces, will have to send their work to the big academies because the local journals are not going to count as journals of record. So the big academies, by simply denying publication, they will deny priority. So correctly, Brewster sees that something new had happened. The priority now is folded with judgment. It's no longer a timestamp of a claim, but is a timestamp of a claim that has been peer-reviewed and accepted. Okay? So Brewster thinks that people are at risk of sending manuscript, basically what's happening with the NIH. People are at risk of sending their manuscript to powerful institutions. The powerful institutions deny publication and use the claim. Okay? So not only that this is a way to add power to the big academies because everybody has to go there and use their journals, but it's also basically giving additional information to these academies that might use it unethically. The second thing that is interesting is that he's saying, if we go down this path, people will publish earlier and earlier, and they will pre-publish. So which is actually interesting because this is effectively the salami science that sociologists are talking about today, where you break up claims and you publish what is the LPU, the least publishable unit. So you publish a tranche of a claim that is big enough to become an article, but you don't want to put two big claims in an article because you want to split them into articles, right? So Brewster says people are going to publish, pre-publish more and more because they're going to fear to be scooped. The problem is that they're going to publish a lot of garbage. Or if it's not garbage, they're going to publish something that is raw and is going to give it to people who will have the resources to run with it, right? Which is exactly what we see with the plagiarism of grant proposals. You send something, and the person who reviews it, who is likely to be more senior than the applicant, probably has a nice lab ready to run with a new idea, right? So the first one is Brewster is astutely sees the development of certain kind of monopolistic features to the academic system by folding priority and peer review together. And then he has this thing about the salami science, that people will publish smaller claims as early as they possibly can, which is going to damage the quality and also give these raw claims to people who actually can flesh them out. Here's Brewster. If priority of publication is to carry off the laurel from priority of invention or discovery, the philosopher must rush upon the world with his first conceptions, frequently the germs of great discoveries. Frequently the germs of great discoveries, not great discovery, but the germs of great discoveries. And if the secrets thus thrown to the wind does light upon good soil, meaning an academy, the harvest will pass into an alien granary, should the seed have escaped from the grubs of science or the parasitic monad that pick the brains of philosophers. So to wrap up, I think that these two regimes that are in many ways, they're certainly different and in some cases opposed, basically I think indicate that there is no way to define priority. The priority is something that exists within certain regimes with certain protocols, certain technologies. So effectively, when we say, assigning priority, claiming priority, determining priority, those are effectively games. So, those are actions within a game, and if you change the rules of the game, you get a completely different product, as I've hoped to have shown between the early modern case based on anagrams and the social and the new, still the model that is still with us of institution-based assessment and crediting of scientific priority. Thank you.